Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. And again, welcome. We are so glad that you are here. And I just have to say to everyone that it's been a number of years and we did it, right? Finally. Got back together, and this is so amazing. I just want to thank you all again for coming. Some of you came from miles and miles and long drives and long flights and flights and drives and all that. And so, again, just happy you could be here, but you are not here to hear me speak tonight. Although I do want to give a couple of thank yous before I bring up our planning committee co-chairs. I do want to thank my team, who has been busy. All those mugs that you're seeing on your tables with the hand wash only, all those had to be, and please, hand wash only, and all the name tags and tickets and everything that were put together. My team has been working for weeks on doing that to get everything ready for this weekend. I also want to, he's not out here right now, but I want to thank Gerald and the staff that are working so hard tonight to get you these delicious meals and now the flourless chocolate cake and working the bars. So again, thank you to the staff tonight. We appreciate that. So I don't know, many of you probably don't know that my career was at the Ann Arbor News for a number of years, not in editorial. I did come up to the advertising part of the Daily to exchange ads when print ads were a really big thing, so I'm dating myself now. And we would share bivouac ads and we would share all of these other advertisers' ads back and forth. And so I would go on sales calls with our advertising director. And I hope he's not watching tonight because this is being live streamed. And every time we get back in the car after a sales call, he'd be like, "So what did you learn today?" And I'd be like, I dreaded that question. But you know, I'm sitting here and all these conversations and emails and the conversations today and the roundtables and conversations we've had with our students already about the roundtable discussions and their interactions with you today. I'm like, this is what I've learned. In all the years that I have been here, there is such an amazing, passionate group of Daily alumni who are willing to do whatever it takes to help. And I had so many people asking about, well, you know, can I be a panelist, or what can I do, and how can I help? And I don't think that's ever going away. And I'm so pleased that you are all here tonight, and thank you again. The things that I've learned, I have a list of people now that I should be reaching out to for more alumni talks and all these kinds of things. And so making the connections too with our current students. And I hope that those of you who are here for the roundtables this morning found that to be a valuable, engaging experience. You are here because you want to be with your classmates, but I thought it was important for you to understand what's happening in the newsroom of 2024 and what the students are doing today. So thank you again. And I just want to recognize our committee co-chairs, Pete Mooney and Linda Wrightson-Benson, who will be coming up for just a short time, and we'll take it from here. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Hello and welcome back to Ann Arbor if you have traveled a distance. I'm Linda Reistman Benson. I worked on the Daily from 1959 to 1962. 134 years of editorial freedom. I'm almost up there. But So welcome. And Pete Mooney is a co-chair, and he wants to say a few words too.
Very few. Pete Mooney. I was on the Daily in the 80s, serving 1 year as opinion page editor back in 88. I'd like to thank and ask to stand up each of our committee members. Those are Ken Davidoff, Tina Anderson, Roger Rappaport, and Larry Kirschbaum.
We would like to now turn the microphone over to the Daily's current editors and leaders, and thank you very much, and enjoy the wonderful chocolate dessert.
And thank you for being here. Thank you for coming.
How can you resist chocolate, right?
Hi, we wanted to thank you guys all for coming. I'm Dana. I'm one of the co-editors-in-chief for The Daily for 2024.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha. I am the other co-editor-in-chief. The other.
My name's Ella. I am the business manager for The Daily.
Sorry, everyone. Okay. So I am super excited to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight, Mara Gay. Mara is a member of the New York Times editorial board and a political analyst at MSNBC, where she appears regularly on Morning Joe and Deadline White House. Mara's award-winning journalism focuses on politics, national affairs, and New York. She has written extensively about many of the events that have gripped the nation in recent years, from the 2020 election to the pandemic and rising threats to American democracy. Before joining the Times in 2018, Mara was a political reporter at the Wall Street Journal, where she covered City Hall and reported on major national news like the 2015 church shooting in Charleston, South Carolina. Mara has also worked for the New York Daily News, The Atlantic, and The Daily, an all-digital newspaper owned by News Corp. She has a degree in political science from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, where she also wrote for the Michigan Daily, which is why she's here today. And she currently lives in Brooklyn. As a fellow Brooklynite, I am super excited to have her here. But it is my pleasure to bring her up to the stage. You all can hear what she has to say for herself.
So can you guys hear me okay? I actually don't do this a lot, so I'm pretty nervous. There's nothing like coming back to where it all started. I just want to thank you all so much for truly what means a lot. First of all, before I say anything else, just thank you to Linda and Peter. Thank you to Dana and Samantha and Ella, and of course Kathy, who is the great maestro behind this event. Wouldn't have happened without her. Yes, yes. Yes. So speaking of a group effort, I do have some prepared remarks. I apologize in advance. I came pretty much off the campaign trail, and it's been pretty busy. So I do have some thoughts that I've written down to talk to you guys about, but I just wanted to just kind of share part of a conversation that was happening at this table, because speaking of a group effort, Peter Eckstein here was just telling me, who was at the, right here, raise your hand, Peter. Yep. So, yeah. So, Peter, who started reporting for the Michigan Daily in the late 50s, right? Yeah. was telling us, myself and the students, an extraordinary story about a woman named Deborah Bacon, who was the Dean of Women at the University of Michigan in the late 50s and early 1960s. Miss Bacon, who today I think we would call Aunt Lydia, for those of you familiar with the phrase from The Handmaid's Tale, was in charge of policing the conduct of women, which in her view included apparently making sure that white women weren't dating black men or any non-white people, weren't kissing in public, and any matter of other infractions, I imagine. But what I love about this story is that Peter shared it because he was talking about how he had hoped to write about her, and it was a frustration that he really never got the story done that he wanted to get done. But he did tell Tom Hayden about his frustrations and how the dean had been harassing women who were dating black men, including one white woman who said she really didn't want the story in the Daily because she needed the dean of students to sign off on her application for medical school. And so when Tom found out about it, he raised hell as well. And long story short, she ultimately did resign. She was the last dean of students. But then I guess she lived forever. And it turns out, after looking her up, she was 98 when she died. I was here at school, and Don Frassard, who many of you know, is the managing news editor here, who is a contemporary of mine, wrote her obituary. And then today, just full circle, we have just seeing, Ella and Dana and Samantha leading the Daily, it really brings home that everybody got it done together. And apologies to Miss Bacon, but this is really satisfying to see. And I just love, yeah. So, but the reason that gets me excited is because I know we're here for a reunion and we're reminiscing, and so many of us spent some of the most formative years of our lives here. We have relationships that go back to a time in that building where we just had a little happy hour that many of us consider one of the best times of our lives. But I think it's so important to think about what we're doing in the future and where we're putting all of the energy in this room. We're all still here. We have a lot of power and talent, and I just hope that we can pay that forward. And I just love seeing the Daily continuing to just stand up for editorial freedom, especially at this time. So that's the end of my little tangent. But I wanted to, I actually wanted to talk about something. It's a little bit of a vibe shift, so for sure. I have to apologize, but I wanted to take a minute to think about a friend that we lost, that some of us here lost last year, which was Samantha Wool. And some of you may know her. She was a wonderful feminist, Michigan Daily alum, college Democrat, and the leader of a synagogue in downtown Detroit Synagogue. And she was murdered last year, almost a year ago. She should be here at the reunion, is how I feel. But the reason that I bring her up is not just because we're here in Ann Arbor, but because I've been thinking so much in the past year about her legacy, and she was only 40 years old, and so I think, what are we all still doing here? And I think it's very easy to get busy and kind of lose your way, and I happen to be, a mid-career journalist or approaching that, so I'm certainly getting to that point in time where I'm starting to think about, am I spending my time the right way? You build capital. We have a lot of capital in this room. How are we spending it? And I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about Sam. She and I weren't best friends, but we were friends. And she was a few years older than I. She was my introduction to campus politics. I can still remember her bounding into the Daily, usually armed for a fight. She became obsessed at one point in getting the university to divest from Coca-Cola because of the human rights abuses that it had been perpetrating across the globe, in her view. She was a proud Zionist. She was a feminist. She was someone who was a bridge builder as well with Arab and Muslim communities. And when she died, many of us of all backgrounds, just kind of were shocked and texted each other, someone murdered our friend. And I think this happened in the weeks after the October 7th attack on Israel. And seeing that community come together to mourn Sam was a very beautiful experience. And it's one that I've been thinking about all year because I just think we can't let it end there. We can't let her legacy end there. And I don't want the legacy of the Daily to stop, at the boundaries of Ann Arbor either. She was a fierce supporter of affirmative action and of black students at a time when most Michiganders, even many of my fellow classmates, were not, and banned affirmative action by ballot initiative in 2006 when I was a sophomore. I admired her. I admired her as a woman, as a feminist, as someone who put people first and fought for them even when she didn't agree with them, which is like a rare thing at the moment. So I guess I just, in this inflection point, as I'm thinking about how to spend this time, I'm wondering if instead of only reminiscing, we might all think a little bit about what more we can do to pay not just her legacy forward, but that to kind of honor the fire that brought us all into the Michigan Daily to begin with, and keep that going. I don't want to see that stop at the Stanford Lipsey building. I think the world needs everybody in here. I know it's easier said than done. Everybody is very busy. I've been on the campaign trail following the Democrats all year. No. All right, I don't know. Clap for Kamala Harris? I don't know. I've been following not just Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, but also state house candidates that are trying to unseat Republican supermajorities across the country, who are taking away rights that we have enjoyed for most of our lifetimes. Hispanic voters in Nevada who work the casinos and hotels in the Culinary Workers Union. I've spoken to black voters in rural Georgia who are worried about the price of food, but also are jealously guarding their voting rights that their grandparents and people still living today put their lives on line to secure. And I've spoken to a lot of young voters who, you won't be surprised, told me that they were really sick of both Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and they've gotten their way. As my career has progressed, I have come across people who were extraordinary in some way. I'm sure many of us have had that experience. Some of them have been very powerful for one reason or another. Some brilliant, others successful or just really rich. In elite spaces across the United States and much of the world, most people attend Ivy League schools, and there's nothing wrong with that, I guess. I've felt pretty smug lately because it's kind of fun to compare the post-presidency of Gerald Ford. Yes, let's clap for Gerald Ford. A proud Michigan alum with, certain Ivy League graduates who are out to divide this country in unfathomable ways for their own gain. And frankly, I don't think that they would know the meaning of public service if it was a stock option. But the truth, though, let's be honest about it, is that the University of Michigan and the Michigan Daily, though a public university still, remains an elite place. And I think if we really want to make a difference, if we really want to live out the values that brought all of us together in the first place, I think we should own that. We should be honest about that. We should embrace that, and we should use that power in some really thoughtful and creative ways to make the world a better place. I think to truly set ourselves apart, we have to understand that. And we have to share that with colleagues who didn't have the benefit of attending a public university and all that comes with that. And I do believe that it was a privilege, not just to attend Michigan, but to attend a public school. But my favorite part of my job is when I come across someone who's doing work that isn't just important or prominent, but who serves the public and serves the interest of justice. And often, I do discover that those people are Michigan alumni. Yeah, that's right. So, again, in the past 2 decades alone, we have a list of alumni who include a member of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, a leader in the International Campaign to Abolish Landmines, who won the Nobel Prize in 2017, a documentarian detained by the Chinese government for 5 years for covering religious repression, and a scientist, a woman, who was part of a team that made it possible for the world to see the first direct image of a massive black hole. I don't need to see that, but that's great. And in this very room, we have civil rights attorneys, former prosecutors, teachers, journalists, and of course a few flacks. It's okay. Just last week, that's okay. It's a mutually beneficial relation. It's fine. Just last week on the campaign trail, I was in North Carolina and I met another Michigan alumna, Nicole Sidman, who's a State House candidate who is fighting to win back a seat from Tricia Cotham. And just a little quick background. Tricia Cotham was a longtime Democrat who ran for office in 2022 in a suburban Charlotte seat as a pro-choice Democrat. And when she was elected by people who knocked doors and volunteered on her campaign, under those auspices, she switched sides, handing the Republicans a 1-member supermajority and allowing them to enact a 12-week abortion ban. And then they redistricted the seat from a D+11 maybe to lean Republican. And so the thing about this is that there are people of all parties who are good public servants, or both parties I should say, and there are people of both parties who, probably belong in jail. Frankly, seriously, it's not a joke, it's unfortunate. But I just love that the sense of public service that guides alumni from this university is something I'm very proud of, and I hope it's something that you're proud of too. And in 2012, a friend from the Michigan Daily, Imran Syed, who's here. Raise your hand, Imran. Okay, he hates this. I'm so sorry. He called to see if I would consider writing about a client of his, David Gavitt, who had been wrongfully convicted of killing his wife and child and had spent 26 years in prison. He was exonerated. And, it didn't surprise me that Imran was doing this work, but it made me proud, and it still does. He's a co-director at the Innocence Clinic at Michigan Law. And that's right, yeah. So I think all of this is to say, at its best, what the Michigan Daily does and what the University of Michigan does is inspires us to look at public service in a different way, and to put people first. And I know that for some of you, that's been a literal vocation. Maybe you've run for office, or you've worked for government. Maybe you've done nonprofit work or worked in law enforcement or medicine. If your path looks different, that's okay too. Because the truth is that the country needs people in business who care about the people and communities that they're selling products to and who are building their wealth. We need people in business who put stakeholders above shareholders. We need parents who are going to fight for all kids to get a public education, even if they can afford private school. We need people to run for office. We need YIMBYs, which is yes in my backyard. We need people who are going to say, yes, go ahead, build that homeless shelter. Yes, go ahead, build that affordable housing, even if it's going to ruin my view. It needs people who are dedicated and committed to restoring trust in government and public health and journalism and this democracy. And I just think about Sam, and I think what she would have called that and what we would have agreed on, because, she was my sparring partner. And this would be the moment where we would argue about something ridiculous. But what we would have agreed on is that what we would call that is the beloved community. And I think I'm really proud of that. And I just hope that everybody in this room is proud of that too and can take that on the road, because let's be honest, things are tough out there. And we can talk a big game, go blue, this and that, but we're really no different if we don't make ourselves different in that way. So that's all for me, and I'm just going to let you all ask questions and hopefully talk amongst yourselves about, more interesting pursuits. But I'm really honored to be here, and I'm so grateful for the time that I've had with all of you here tonight, and also with my friends who I worked at the Daily with many late nights. And yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
All right, so Mara, this is the time that you just want people to raise their hand and ask questions, and we've got a couple microphones we'll be walking around with, and let's get you a mic.
Thank you. Yeah, in the back.
Till we get him his mic.
Is this on?
Mara, thank you. Thank you for all you do. Love reading your stuff. Love watching on MSNBC. Something happened around June of 2015. Someone walked down an escalator, announced he was running for president, and it seems like our social fabric, our body politic, so much of friendships, relationships frayed, norms shattered. And my question to you is, if Trump's political fortunes die, will Trumpism die with it? What does our body politic look like in the event that, at least hopefully from one person's view of the world, that in fact he loses?
Yeah.
Where to from here?
That's a great question. I should say, first of all, I have a dear friend, a former colleague who covered Maduro in Venezuela, and he feels very strongly, Willie Newman is his name, he's written a book on Venezuela, and he feels that basically Chavez died, but Chavismo lives, and so I think there's a great risk that the same thing happens with Trumpism. At the same time, it kind of takes a certain spark, a certain kind of dark, charismatic leader to ignite that movement, and we've seen it. So we don't really know. Nobody knows what happens after. But what I feel very strongly about is that you really need, I mean, this sounds very cliche, but like bending the arc toward justice is very important, toward democracy is very important. So I just don't, I mean, why wait and see what happens? Why not just do what we need to do to support our democracy? And there are places around the world, including here in the United States, in the American South, where we can learn within our lifetimes what to do, how to protect democracy, and I think more could be done. especially at the local and state level, which is just the most frustrating thing is to see less and less local coverage. Actually, my former editor is in the room, Erin Einhorn, back there. Thank you, Erin, for teaching me how to keep those people at City Hall on their toes. But how many city halls across the country, like in Ferguson, Missouri, just aren't getting the coverage that they need? So there's a lot to worry about, but I think it's just best to get to work.
Thanks again for appearing here. We really appreciate your presence. So many of us are familiar with or live in the bubble that is Ann Arbor, okay? So it is fascinating to us to see that the polls are still roughly 50-50. And that, in my little bubble, astounds me. What do you see as the key dynamics prevailing across America that make this such a contested race? What's going on in the communities that really support Mr. Trump, as your paper refers to him? What's going on there? What do you see as the key factors that contribute to this fascinating 50-50 split?
Yeah, so I should say, first of all, I have not been covering the Republicans. I have been covering the Democrats and the Democratic coalition. So very, very briefly, Trumpism as a phenomenon does appear to be a cultural and political phenomenon, so I'll leave it at that. I mean, there are plenty of people in this room. You all are as much expert in that as I am at this point. In terms of people who maybe aren't the core MAGA crowd, but they're on the fence or they're talking about staying home, it's a lot of things. I think the economy has a lot to do with it. When I talk to voters, I hear a lot of times that they can't afford the rent. They can't afford their mortgages. They can't afford to buy homes. And then on top of that, now they can't afford groceries. And none of this is to say that Donald Trump would help them do any of those things. I think that there's just a serious alienation from the political system in general, from a lot of Americans. And if you think about the things that have taken place, especially we lost, over 1 million people are dead from COVID, and the chaos of the Trump years, there's a lot of trauma too, and a lot of distrust in government and institutions. So part of the work, I think, has to be to rebuild that trust. And that goes for journalism as well. I mean, you can't think that someone's going to listen to you when you suggest they may want to vote a certain way if they don't trust you to begin with. So we're up against a lot. Okay.
Ditto on respecting you, especially since I'm an MSNBC addict. I live in Washington, D.C., a committed statehood advocate. Hopefully one day we'll not be the only capital in the world that doesn't have statehood and voting representation. But what I can't understand, I get the New York Times every day. I pay for it in person. I love reading it. Why did they decide not to chime in on local elections? It's absolutely baffling to me. And I'm just wondering, I know we talked a little before, but it might be on other people's minds.
Yeah, I mean, it's above my pay grade. That's what I was hired to do initially on the editorial board, is to write on New York State and local politics. I'm really proud of the work that we did, endorsing, for example, DA Alvin Bragg, and a lot of others. And, in my mind, the more local coverage, the better, but it's above my pay grade. Well, it's absolutely a trend that fewer people, places are around to cover local and state politics, and it's a real issue. because I think people are unfortunately getting news from Facebook, Russians, trolls, other sources.
Yeah, that sort of takes up with where I was going to ask you about the future. My son Adam and I are two generations of Michigan Daily writers, and I think about it, and I think, well, is there going to be a third generation? Because the Daily is only publishing once a week now, and this is happening more and more. These local papers are contracting or disappearing. There's more information out there. A lot of it is misinformation. A lot of it is half information. What's going to happen? How do you see this all playing out? And I'm sure you must talk about it a lot in the newsroom.
For sure. I mean, one thing that I'm first of all, well, I think there's a lot of people in this room who probably have a lot of great ideas about the business of journalism, and smarter people than I are at work on that, I hope. But I would say just one point of that I feel strongly about is that there's so much talk in the business about just readers, the number of readers, and that's very important because it's now a subscriber-based industry, not an advertising-based industry. It's very important. But one thing that I hope that my colleagues, not just at the Times, but just in general in journalism, can focus on is growing the market itself, not just growing market share for individual publications. Because I think we should be asking ourselves, why is it that there are wide swaths of the country who don't feel that we have anything that they need or want? And I think we can do a lot better job covering different kinds of communities, racial, geographic, socioeconomic, and in some ways that's an old song, but it was never really done all the way. So I think that is always on my mind. I mean, I always want, an endorsement to be as important to a reader in Bedford-Stuyvesant as it is on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And I just think that, there's a lot of reflection about that. At the same time, we have a product that people are reading, and it's been very successful. So there's, yet again, an issue of how to pay for good journalism. Good journalism's expensive. No one's figured it out yet, but they feel in some ways better than they were. I was talking to the students yesterday a little bit about this. Going to journalism is hard right now. I think there's something like 30,000 jobs in the industry. There were maybe 70 when I graduated, but in 2008 when I graduated, it was awful, and alumni would come back and tell us not to get into the business. I'll never tell you that, but we've got to figure out how to pay for it, and we've got to figure out how to get enough Americans and not just here in the United States, enough people invested in it that this is something they decide they can't live without.
Mara, thank you for speaking. I live in Chicago, and I travel a fair amount, and I've experienced this phenomenon. And when I travel, somebody asks me where I live, and one of two things happens. I say I'm from Chicago, and they say, oh, I love Chicago, or I've been there, whatever comment. Or they ask, is it safe? And even though I live and work in that city, no matter how much I tell them things are fine, they are going to insist to me that I live in a cesspool of violence. So I watch you often on MSNBC. I read the Times every day. But I know those people who insist that I live in this cesspool don't watch MSNBC, don't read the Times, and are just the victims of the silo effect. How do we get information to some of these people who may be very well-meaning, but I think Barack Obama once said, if I watched Fox News, I'd hate me too. So how do you How do we deal with it?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I think it's not only journalism, but it's got to start in communities. That sounds schmaltzy, but it's not. I mean, that's how Barack Obama was elected, was through community organizing, actually. And that's where it's got to start. I should say, too, that there are journalists who, actually friends of mine, too, a friend of mine, Josh Dossie, is a former White House reporter who is from rural South Carolina. He's a white man. He's got a great accent. And he is really expert at, and he's not an opinion writer, so it's not as though he's on some campaign, but he's really expert at writing about talking to certain communities that I cannot, and the opposite is true. And so, I've done plenty of reporting on Republicans before. At the same time, I think there is an element of it has to start in your own house, right? So if there's an issue with, a certain, if it's white men who are watching Fox News, who, are in QAnon, then it's not going to do a lot of good for someone to expect someone like me to reach them. And so, that has to come from their daughter, their pastor, their friend at work. And I think that's kind of why I said to all of you, it's like, what is it that we can do close to home? And it's not necessarily just about elections, but it's like, we can all make our communities a little better, but you can't expect an outsider in some ways, if somebody who isn't trusted, to be the messenger. Does that make sense?
I live in a city where 15% of the population voted for Trump. So in terms of turning to me and say, well, you be the messenger. Not that you're saying that, but
I'm not necessarily talking about you in this
right.
case.
But my point is, I don't know how to break through. Yes, there can be individual messengers, but I don't know how to get past the addiction and the silo.
I'll be honest, I don't know either, and I will tell you that for a variety of reasons, while I think it's a really good question, when I think about the kind of impact that I am able to have, there's a lot of reasons. The reason I chose to focus, for example, on the Democrats this year is because Trumpism is essentially a known entity. There are plenty of people covering Trumpism. That's important. That's great. The question then becomes, what does the rest of the country do? And why? And how? And what does that look like? And so there's much more dynamism there. And so, that's why I have been focused on them. So I may not be the right person to answer that question, but it's a good question.
Hi, Mara. Thanks for speaking. I wanted to turn to a slightly different topic. You mentioned in one of your answers about 1 million people having died from COVID. I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about your experience with COVID and what maybe you think could be improved about coverage of it.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for that question. I almost died of COVID in April 2020. I was 33 years old, no pre-existing conditions, woke up, couldn't breathe, and ultimately survived, thank God. And it was the beginning of a very long way back for me. Got severe COVID, got grazed by long COVID, did a lot of physical therapy. It was a very humbling experience. I'm very lucky to be healthy and whole, and a lot of people still need a lot of help. This was also a mass disabling event for many Americans of working age. I guess when I think about, we're still, I don't want to have the audacity to suggest that I know all the lessons from this yet. We're still living through it in many ways. But one thing I will say that has been a point of frustration to me is just the lack of grieving, the lack of acknowledgement. I live in New York City, and 30,000 of my neighbors died in a matter of weeks. My accountant is dead. the man who owns my favorite diner is dead. He used to greet me every morning when I was a cub reporter near City Hall. I'd come in really early and, you know, welcome back. He's dead. Several of my friends can't work because they've been disabled by COVID. And I think there was a woman I wrote about, actually, who was a female paramedic who was fighting for better pay from the city's fire department, which is overwhelmingly male in New York City. She was in a coma for a month and can't work. So I think I would say that there's been no accountability for that, and that's painful. I think it's just another wound on the country to add to many others. I also think that this is just a quick personal point of interest, which is I really don't think that public health has seen quite the reckoning that it needs to, because in New York we were told not to wear masks. And instead of just saying to people, to the public, this is an example of public trust and how it's lost. Instead of saying to the public, here's what we know and here's what we don't know, they said, here's what we think you need to know. And then they got it wrong. And then, you know, we like to make fun of people who are using ivermectin, and yet there's been no accountability in many ways. Schools that should have remained open, learning that was lost. So, yeah, I think that it's another example, unfortunately, of something where the country is just get over it. And you just add that to the stack of trauma, which is why we can't get along with each other. So I do think it has to be addressed.
Mara, I listened to you saying you're covering the Democrats. I would like to know what your assessment is about how the Democrats are doing. Specifically, I'll just name a few, but you can elaborate on others. There's somebody named Kamala running for president. How is Josh doing in North Carolina? Jackie Rosen in Nevada, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, et cetera.
Okay, really quickly, Jackie Rosen is a very strong candidate. Pretty much, Josh Stein, very strong candidate. You may have heard his opponent, Mark Robinson, is in some trouble. The gubernatorial candidate in North Carolina is in some big trouble on the Republican side. Yeah, I mean, I think that, I don't know what to say about it. I think that people are running pretty strong races. The Democrats that you named are very strong candidates. That's probably why they're like nationally known. One of the more interesting questions is why it is that in places like New York, we don't have like very strong public servants of either party. And I think the Democratic Party is basically in free fall in New York, which is a very interesting story. And part of that is because the state's party kind of functions more like an incumbency protection racket, in my opinion, than it does. It's not really set up to run competitive elections. Aaron Einhorn could get up here and give us a lecture on why. But so, you know, the Democrats that come from states like Michigan tend to be much better at competing. Nevada, North Carolina, these are states where you have to really compete to win. Yeah.
Thanks so much for, is it me? Okay.
Sure.
Thanks so
Hi.
much for coming tonight. I really appreciate you being here. My question for you is, you talked about the lack of local journalism and local voices.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here thinking about how much power and talent is in this room, and the power that our voices have in our local communities or to our networks that are also very powerful and talented. What do you wish that you saw people like us saying more? What do you wish that you saw people like us saying more in this time period?
That's a great question. That's a really great question. I don't have like one answer for it. I just think maybe that's a question for everybody in this room. But I guess I just would say just to do the hard thing when it's the right thing. And just as an example, I know I was kind of joking about YIMBYs and NIMBYs, but it's one thing to, vote a certain way in the presidential election. It's another thing to say, I'm going to vote for somebody who's going to raise my taxes, but I actually think that's the right thing to do because I am part of a community. And this community has needs, and I'm going to support them. And frankly, it doesn't always have to neatly align with a political viewpoint. Sometimes it's the opposite, but I think that's something that covering New York politics is actually I really loved about it, because we're talking about solutions to problems, not just kind of having partisan fights. So I would say if you look around in your community, it's like there's always more that any of us can do, but it's one thing to do the easy thing. It's like, what are the hard things that we're not doing that need to be done, is what I would say. And another example is, I think there are, well, I won't get into the New York City public school system, but I would say that there is a small group of alumni who are big donors who have made it really difficult for Black and Hispanic children to attend the best public schools in New York. And they're kind of throwing around, donor money to keep a test that keeps these kids out that's known to do so. And it's like, can we do that in the opposite direction? I mean, is there some way that we can kind of shift our collective weight? Maybe it's a little painful to us personally, but I think that should be done. So, I mean, the homeless shelter was one example, but I don't know. I'm sure everybody here has thoughts.
Well, hi, Mara. Thanks for coming. You mentioned earlier about the news deserts and lack of coverage. What are your thoughts on sort of nonprofit models, private foundation funding, public funding for local coverage? I live in Michigan, Ann Arbor, which is well covered by the Daily. But much of Michigan, small towns, have nothing. So just curious what you think of some kind of new model for that kind of coverage.
Yeah, I think just as many models as possible I think Mississippi Today, which I believe is a nonprofit newsroom, is another great example of excellent journalism that's really needed at the state and local level. Listen, we need a lot of things, but we need a lot more people who are focused on this problem and on supporting local journalism. I just go back to the example of Ferguson. I mean, if you want to see a city where no one was watching The Shop, that's what happened. So, yeah, I'm for any model that works, that maintains independence, basically. No $1 million idea here.
Hi, Mara.
Hi, Peter.
As an opinion writer on the campaign trail, how do you talk to strangers about politics, and who do you choose to talk to?
Who do I choose to talk to?
Yeah, I mean, you're just out and about, going to these rallies. How do you decide who you want to talk to? How do you approach them?
Yeah, great question. So, Peter and I were in the same dorm freshman year. We have lived together briefly in Ann Arbor. We have had a lot of adventures together. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just because they look like maybe they have a lot to say. Sometimes they're wearing something really colorful. So it kind of and it depends on what I'm looking for, too. I was at a Kamala Harris rally the other day, and this woman was an influencer, I guess, and she just had just a whole neon getup on with a shirt that said she's one of us, and then her sorority on the back, and it was just a lot. I was like, okay, well, this person needs to be interviewed. But you have to get used to rejection, right? So you you never know who's going to want to talk. Yeah. It was just funny because she wouldn't talk to me until she turned on her little GoPro. But it was fine. It was great. She just was really excited about this rally, and she had never voted before, so it was a really fun interview.
Thanks, Mara. It's a great talk. There was a story this week that 45% of the Republicans were polled and said they would not accept a Trump defeat. First of all, is that your reading of, I know you're not covering the Republicans, but your colleagues are, and I'm wondering if you think that story has any validity. And second of all, if it is true, is that something that MSNBC is, the Times are getting ready to, starting to think about how that might play out post-election?
Yeah, no, yes, it's concerning. It's probably true. But saying I don't accept the result doesn't necessarily mean that 70% of those 70% of Americans or Republicans are going to go storm the Capitol. They may just, actually, this is really, so I was at a Forsyth County Board of Elections meeting some months ago, and I watched them disenfranchise some voters. And afterward, I went up to one of the Republican activists, because in Georgia, any citizen can challenge the voter registration of another citizen as many times as he or she wants to. And so I said, well, tell me about why you've dedicated your time in retirement to this. And the woman said, well, I just don't believe it. I said, well, what don't you believe? She said, I just don't believe that there are enough Democrats in this country to have elected Joe Biden, because everyone I know has voted for Trump. And so I say that to say, like, we're not just siloed in media, we're siloed in many different ways. And it's a point of concern not only for trust in the system, but for political violence. Yeah. So we're keenly aware and watching, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you again for coming. With the two attempts on the former president's life, and you're at these rallies, do you worry for your own safety, and have you changed any of your behaviors because of it?
Yeah. So I'm fortunate enough that there's like levels of what people deal with, obviously, and what some of the members of Congress deal with is extraordinary. And also, I should say, and this just really made me sad and it was upsetting. I was at a Kamala Harris rally in North Carolina last week, and I spoke to a woman who is the secretary for the Democratic Party in a small county in rural North Carolina. And this woman was there with her transgender son at this rally, and she said that she had to homeschool her son for his own safety, and she gets threats every week. She's getting threats from neighbors who are saying that they are friends with the sheriff. I don't know who the sheriff is. It's just to say it's not only people who are in public life now who are dealing with this, which is a good example of why no matter whether we agree or disagree with the public figure who is targeted, we should all condemn political violence, because there's no end to it. There's no end to the violence. I have certainly dealt with my share of threats. Usually when I appear unwillingly or unwittingly on Fox News or on Drudge or something like that. It's scary. I live in New York and I feel very safe. I think the thing that really is scary is that I don't know that most Americans really realize what's going on. And again, the idea that there are just voters who are being targeted. I spoke to a black woman who's a poll worker who said she was being harassed by men coming into the polling site trying to intimidate her into voting for Donald Trump. And, so this is a serious issue. It's not just an issue for public figures. It is certainly an issue for public figures. I didn't know if you guys knew that was happening, but that's something, if you really want to know like where this is going, one way to deal with that is to talk to people who live in not just Michigan, but in the South. Like, you'll get a whole different perspective on where things may go. Yeah. There's a little grim note to end on, but things aren't hopeless, so.
Hi, I just wanted to thank you so much for telling us about your friend. I think all of us at all of these different tables of different years ago that we were at Michigan probably have people that we hold close in our hearts who remind us of your friend. And for us, it was our dear friend Katie, who was with us the last time we were at a Michigan Daily reunion. And just your call to be thinking about, yes, right, YIMBY, I love that, and our friend Katie would have loved that, and I think that's just a wonderful idea for all of us to go home with, of like, who isn't at our table tonight? Who are we missing from our times at Michigan, and how can we be inspired by them and keep up with the work? So just thank you so much. It was really beautiful.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Mara. And again, please feel free to continue conversations about topics that Mara shared with you or that you are still continuing to share with your classmates. It's the time where I get to do the Kathy logistics kind of stuff of the night. If, for those of you that are not joining us at the tailgate tomorrow or staying through the brunch, so basically if this is your last event with us, if you're welcome to take your name out of the name tag and leave the tag itself in the basket in the table out in the hall. If you happened to sneak past the good folks from my team that were working at the table and you did not pick up your mug or your pint glass, please talk to us so we can make sure that you got that. Tailgate, for those of you coming, again, it's behind the Stanford Lipsey Student Publications building. Please come anytime around 11. Food will be served at 11:30, and we hope to see you there. And I want to answer one question that's been coming up, because it came up earlier today, and I was chatting with some students. And since I'm the general manager, I figure it's worth the time to be able to talk about it for a minute. I don't really want to answer any questions tonight. Happy to have other conversations with folks. But people have been asking, right, why isn't the Daily a daily anymore? Why isn't printing 5 days a week? Why isn't printing 6 days a week like it was at one point a long time ago? So COVID forced us to make some choices, right? Financially, number one, when the university basically sent everyone home, and university departments who were advertising with us that were told you cannot spend money, like advertising's a non-essential expense, so university units couldn't run anything with us. There was nobody on campus to pick up a paper. So we made the decision, that class of 2020 finished out publishing, put together a paper every day remotely, and put it up on Issue. If you don't see, look at issue.com/Michigan Daily. That's the printed papers put up every Wednesday. If you look across I would say the Big Ten, but now it's about the Big 10,000. When we benchmarked just across kind of the Big 10, 12, 13, 14, I've gone to a lot of business conferences, and the Daily Nebraskan, they don't print anymore. They went down to like 1 day a week and then a monthly magazine, and it's nothing. If you look across the Big Ten, I mean, the Daily is doing phenomenal work, and I know you all agree with that. where they're spending time is preparing themselves for work that they're going to try to do outside of 420 Maynard, where you're asked to take a quick picture and do this and do that, and you're not just writing. So there's 15 sections. If I were running for EIC, I would be asked to name them all, and I can do it. I can't do it in alphabetical order. I will close my eyes and point to every table in the newsroom, but I can do it when I give tours to prospective students. So I know that tactile feel. I worked at the Ann Arbor News for 22 years. I know that tactile feel of a newspaper. There's change, and change is good. And Mara can tell you, she was in the newsroom last night with the students for story meeting. We weren't putting out a paper today. We were putting out online content. We were pushing out another newsletter. Football Saturday newsletter's coming out tomorrow. 6 newsletters, 15 sections, social. It's a lot for these young people to manage. And they're doing a really damn good job of it, too. So I just felt the need to kind of explain that a little bit about some decisions that have been made over the last number of years, and always happy to talk to any of you that have questions about that. And I have a picture of the building, 420 Maynard, and I posted it to Facebook a number of years ago. And I say that when I posted it the first time, said, I have the absolute best job on campus. And it's not a lie. They make me old and they make me feel young, all at the same time. And when they ask me questions like, what is this funky knife, when it's a letter opener that they've never ever seen before? Not you. And talk about, that's how you slice the paper to make tear sheets. What's a tear sheet? So anyway, I could go on, but these are like my children. And so the other thing that I just want to say is one of my student staff, Leah, who's here tonight, she is the one that put all those hand wash only signs on your mugs and cups. She also put all those Michigan Daily magnets and laptop stickers and buttons on the table. So please take those with you. I don't want to have to pick them up tonight. All right. Thank you again. And please keep talking. The bar is still open. Thank you. Have a good night.